I have a possibly radical idea that I wanted to share with everyone. We talk all the time about civilization advancing, and quite frankly, sometimes I think we're going backwards in many ways. I actually studied anthropology in college, and I did a lot of digs, and I went to a lot of sites, archaeological sites throughout the world, and there was no doubt in my mind that some of the ancient civilizations were capable of doing things that we cannot understand how they were done with modern technology, science, engineering. And the same thing when we look at traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurveda. A lot of times we question, oh my God, how could those have been invented so long ago, and yet they are still so effective? And so the first thing that I wanted to talk about is some of the problems with our modern, advanced society. In the United States, when I wrote my book, which was 2023, my book was published, and these were statistics that were effective or current back then, 6 out of 10 Americans were stressed out. And in 2021, the United States Centers for Disease Control reported that more than 2 in 5 adults over the age of 18 experienced symptoms of an anxiety or depressive disorder during the past 7 days. And then only 14% of American adults claimed that they were very happy. So when I look at yoga, I'm a yoga therapist, and when I look at yoga and yoga therapy, to me it's not about doing back bends, and it's not about doing headstands. It's about the union, and the union can be union with nature, union mind, body, soul, union with a higher being. There are so many different ways that you can interpret that, but bottom line, to me, it's about living your best life and being fulfilled. So my concept is that if you take some time out, you really will boost everything else. Why do you think a secular Sabbath or a Shabbat is important? So just think about what you think are correct, and I'm going to have a few more suggestions. And my premise is all the above. So I want to talk about how I came to practicing Shabbat. And again, I do not do it from a religious standpoint. I do it as part of my Ayurvedic dinacharya. And it was my Ayurvedic doctor who I had been seeing for many, many years. And he one year told me, you know, you've got to disconnect. You need to practice Shabbat 1 day a week. His direct quote I loved. He said, on the 7th day, God rested. Apparently that's what the Bible says. And my Ayurvedic doctor said, God didn't rest. The universe would fall apart if she, God, did. But we, us, should rest. So I thought that was a beautiful quote. And I have to admit, I thought, you gotta be kidding. There's no way that I can practice Shabbat. I'm working 7 days a week. I used to be working 80-hour weeks and driving and flying all over, not just the United States, but I was working throughout Latin America as well. And I decided, okay, this is it. I'm gonna do it. And so an entire chapter in my book, From the Boxing Ring to the Ashram, is about the benefits of a secular Sabbath. One thing that I have been telling my students and my clients forever is that most of us need to chill out more. Most of us need more grounding. Our society is ridiculous. You know, most of us have our devices with us on our bodies at all times. First thing we do when we wake up in the morning, we check it. When we go to bed at night, the last thing we do is check our devices. We are on call 24/7. And that is totally the opposite of what yoga and Ayurveda are about. I lead workshops and classes on yoga for women. And what I say all the time is that more likely than not, women need to be doing grounded yoga as opposed to dynamic vinyasa flows. And again, I look at it from the Ayurvedic perspective. And so if a woman is on her monthly cycle, or if she's pregnant or postpartum, peri or postmenopausal, or all those are instances when we need to calm down the vata and we need to get more grounded. And so women in particular really need to do this disconnect. And Shabbat, the way that I do Shabbat is I don't drive, and that's because I was taught many years ago when I was doing my yoga therapy training that all of this movement that we are constantly doing, whether it's driving, whether it's taking rapid transit, whether it's flying in an airplane, it's all aggravating the vata. And then of course, just our society in general is so vata aggravating. So we need to counteract that. I mentioned that in my book, I cite references, or I cite research, and two women that I interviewed and I read their master's theses are from St. Catherine University in Minnesota. So one of them, her name is Irene, and she's a registered nurse and a holistic health coach. And she says, some would say that we have lost our human connection to each other and ourselves in spite of being electronically connected to everything and anything. In reviewing the literature on the health effects from overuse of technology, I came to believe that we need to find a way to take a break from this pseudo connection and return to human interactions without an electronic intermediary. Her thesis, it's a very long name, it's called Unplugging, a phenomenological study of the perceived holistic health benefits from regular digital detox in the context of Jewish Shabbat. And she confirmed that the negative effects of overstimulation and information interload were present. And she says, our reliance and addictions to electronic and digital media damage our physical and mental health. As a result of the social media craze, our interpersonal relationships suffer. Between 1985 and 2004, the number of Americans who considered themselves socially isolated tripled. Now keep in mind how everybody is on social media, and I, for one, have 10,000 followers on social media. And how many do I really know? Those are not true connections and true friends. So Irene did data collection through participants' words and photographs, and in particular what she did was soul collage, and it's a registered trademark. And there were positive commonalities, not surprisingly. She says, from the interviews and discussions of images, 7 themes emerged: mental relief, social connection, self-care, appreciation of nature, spiritual community, stress relief, and respect for spirituality. The majority of the statements by the participants expressed a feeling of peace and serenity. Being unplugged regularly on Shabbat was like a spa for your brain. Participants repeatedly used common words such as peaceful, calm, relaxation, stillness, and relief. All emphasize the importance of being in and tuned in to the rhythm of nature. To me, that's all of what yoga is about. As I said, to me, yoga is not about doing a back bend or a headstand. It's about all the above that I just mentioned. Meanwhile, there was another woman that I mentioned who did her master's thesis also for St. Catherine. She tracked 10 women who were raised as Christians. They were all ethnicities, and the women did not adhere necessarily to the Orthodox practice of Shabbat, but they crafted what worked best for them, and that's what I do. It's like what works best for me. And also taking into consideration what worked for their households and their communities. The participants agreed the day of rest allowed them to be more present in their relationships and more thoughtful and considerate of others. Her research found 6 common themes. Sabbath keeping enhances self-awareness, self-care, relationships, spirituality, and it positively impacted the rest of a participant's week. Isn't that what we all want? And isn't that why so many of us turn to yoga as well? One respondent actually said that the Sabbath day helps her to go from overwhelmed to energized, and she feels a change in power dynamics and closer to God. Another said Sabbath was a day to reground, repurpose, and reflect. And they each suggested society would be better off if a day of rest was the norm. And again, I have to agree, just because I see in my lifetime how things have changed. When I was a kid, stores were only open one night a week. And now, of course, you can go shopping 24/7, brick and mortar, or of course online. And the same thing with work. Work is also 24/7 now. So I also wanted to mention that I did consult my book, From the Boxing Ring to the Ashram, is based on a dozen of my gurus around the world who represent all different religions. And one happens to be a rabbi, but she was a United States Air Force chaplain, which meant that she worked with people of all religions as a chaplain. And I want to mention some of the things that she says because, again, I look at Shabbat as my dinacharya. I disconnect from the religious component, and everything that the rabbi says to me is all about yoga. Again, the way that I interpret it. And she says, Shabbat is a gift to those who keep it, Jewish or not, through community, through prayer, through singing, through eating, through loving, through rest and repeating. A time for human and holy connections. The literal meaning of Shabbat is to stop, cease, or rest, which is what we all need to do more, and as I mentioned, especially women. The Torah states Shabbat vayi nafash, which essentially means stop, rest, and be refreshed. Now, I personally, as an anthropology student, I also studied linguistics, and I love linguistics. And she says nafash is related to the word nefesh, which means the soul, S-O-U-L. In other words, the rabbi says, stop, be refreshed, nourish your soul. You have to unplug from the material into that which is infinite. Today's world is run, run, run. There are so many distractions. The bigger question is, what are we running from? Shabbat was a radical realization back in the day because it was all about devoting ourselves to being in prayer, being in family, being in community, and being centered. So again, isn't that pretty much what you want to do through yoga? And in my book, I share 5 tips from the rabbi, and I also share tips on how to give it a try, so I won't bore you. And that's it. Thank you, and try to disconnect on a periodic basis. From my heart to yours. 3 deep breaths. And connect.